What is up, you guys? I know I am way behind on the on my Supercross recaps, but I'm gonna do Daytona now. Even though Indianapolis was this past weekend, or not this past weekend, but 2 weeks ago, because this past week was the off weekend of Supercross. But in the meantime, I'm gonna get to these as soon as possible. And remember, guys, subscribe if you think that I'm worth listening to, or if you just want to see some more of my games. I'm hopeful to have one up this coming week. But in the meantime, I also have my recap of the 2026 Big West Tournament, and I can't wait to get to that one. I'm going to say that right now. But in the meantime, as far as Daytona goes, let's get into this. I'm going to start with the 250 class here. Seth Hammaker leads gate to flag. Now, this is a good race for Seth because I picked him to win the East title, or whichever division he was assigned to. And in this case, it's the East. And for Seth to lead wire to wire like that, wow. I really hope that he backs me up and manages to win the 250 East title in 2026. Because after motocross didn't go particularly well for him, you have to start somewhere to be able to get some momentum and make a run at the championship. And that's exactly what Seth Hammaker did. And I'll say this. If he can take that going into Indianapolis, now I've yet to see that race because I was away at the Shave Ice Cup. But in the meantime, I do think that Seth will start somewhere and get the championship. It isn't going to be easy, but you know, the pro circuit is long overdue because we're coming up on 10 years since they last got a title, and that was Justin Hill in 2017. And to be frank, Seth Hammaker appears to be their best shot at a championship if last year was any indication. Now, the big bummer of all, Drew Adams hits the podium with the third place for the first time in his career, and now he's out with a thumb injury. So that just goes to show that for Mitch Payton, you're probably wishing that you did keep Ty Masterpool for another year. And to be frank, I do think that Ty would have done a lot of good this season if he were still under pro circuit. But you never know where the logic of signing guys is concerned. I'm still kind of scratching my head a little bit to why Cameron McAdoo got an additional year. And, well, of course, he was signed for 2 years. And Ty Masterpool was only signed for, I would say, a season and a half. But still, that's too bad what happened to Ty, and now he's out for the season with shoulder surgery. And he's out until the Nationals begin. But I look for Ty to do well on that Yamaha in the 450 class. And the unfortunate part is that today, it seems like second chances, unless your name is Cameron McAdoo, almost don't exist anymore. Because when you have a guy who's signed for 2 years, does bad 1 year, and then comes back the second year, does a little better, but not as well as he would have liked. It just goes to show that sometimes this sport can chew you up and spit you out. And I think that's what they're doing with Ty Masterpool right now. But still, back to Daytona, I didn't see much as far as the 250 main was concerned because Seth Hammaker shut the door on the battle for the win. And the unfortunate part was that Drew Adams, his teammate, suffered a thumb injury, and now he's out for an undetermined amount of time. The one guy that I thought had an okay performance was Joe Shimoda. And odds are that he's still trying to work his way back into shape. Would I have picked Joe as this champion for the series? No, but especially because he was coming back from that injury. But I won't doubt that Joe's going to win a race or two. Just like with Pierce Brown, like how I don't doubt that he's going to win another one of these races, especially since he won the opener. But obviously, we'll see what happens. So I'm going to try to keep this a little short today. But now let's get to the 450 class. There's a little bit more there. Daytona is Eli Tomac country. This is the 450 class. Tomac wins 8th Daytona race, but loses a tooth on the podium. That was a little bit of a WTF kind of moment. Like, what the blank kind of moment. And for Hunter Lawrence, he could have done better. I stand by that because he got the whole shot in the main event. But as soon as he lost the lead to Ken Roczen, he was pretty much ruined for the rest of the race. Now, I don't think that Hunter Lawrence did a particularly terrible job. I just think that he could have rode better. But losing the lead right away to Ken Roczen on the opening lap had to have been a bit of a momentum killer for him. And for Eli Tomac, you cannot just take Daytona away from him, that Daytona magic from him. I thought it was something when Jeremy McGrath won 6 in a row at Minneapolis in the Metrodome, only to lose in 2000 to David Villeman and never win again in the Metrodome after that. But, you know, I thought it was also something when Ricky Carmichael won his 5th Daytona race in 2006, and then Tomac had eclipsed that record a couple years, or I should say about 10 years later or so. But still, or almost 20 years later. But still, Tomac wins his 8th Daytona race. The way that he rides at Daytona is almost like how McGrath races at Minneapolis. Like, you can't do no wrong. At least up until you lose for the first time. Am I saying that that last year was the first time that Tomac lost Daytona, or 2 years ago? No, but still, you put Eli Tomac at Daytona and you compare that to Jeremy McGrath's success at the Metrodome, I'll bet you anything, there's hardly any difference. Okay? Because although McGrath won Minneapolis 6 years in a row, and Tomac's 8 wins at Daytona are kind of scattered, you can kind of see a similarity there because the way that Tomac rides, it's like that magic never leaves him, especially when he's at Daytona. You know, kind of like how that magic never left McGrath at Minneapolis. But anyway, does Tomac have to have some kind of like a win streak like that in one venue to be declared one of the greatest of all time? Not necessarily, but then again, sometimes when it's your stadium, it's your stadium. And Daytona is Eli Tomac's stadium. That's for sure. Just like how Minneapolis seems to be McGrath's stadium because he won 6 in a row from 94 to 99. And nothing really was more special to Jeremy in the Metrodome than 1997 when he won his first race of the season. And if Daytona was Eli Tomac's first win of the season, I might compare that in the future. But still, congrats to Tomac, but obviously losing his tooth on the podium, I think that goes to show that was unfortunate what happened to that trophy. But especially when the trophy had broke and it hit Tomac in the tooth, that's like, how the heck does that happen? You know, kind of like what happened with Sebastian Tortelli at Redbud 01 when he had the first moto in hand and then his bike runs out of gas. Like, how does that happen? That's kind of one of those things where it's kind of virtually impossible to happen, but there's always that possibility. And unfortunately for Eli Tomac, that trophy breaking and chipping his tooth was one of them. Now, is that going to put a dent in his wallet at the dentist? Probably not, but I still think he got that taken care of, and that's not going to affect his season at all. And that's where I'll leave it. So as far as Ken Roczen goes, I was looking for a little bit more from him, but something tells me that he's got to talk to someone like Mike LaRocco or somebody else about trying to get stronger in the last 4 to 5 laps of the race, because it seems like once he gets to the end of the race, he starts to get winded, and that's going to kill Ken Roczen as the season starts to wind down. Now, before I say goodbye, I want to backtrack a little bit to Seattle, and I also want to address something that Jason Wygant had said. Now, is he going to see this? I kind of doubt it. And is this a shot to his credibility? Hardly. But still, hearing him talk about the history of Seattle and calling 97 the last time that they raced that early in the calendar year in Seattle, no, that's actually wrong, because it was actually 1999 that was the last time that they raced in Seattle that early in the calendar year. And it was in about February, or maybe late January, early February. And for Seattle to be held in February and still avoid a mud race, that's good. But still, if you're Jason Wygant and you're kind of like what some people would say as a student of the sport, you got to know these little facts here. Now, am I trying to tear apart Jason Wygant? Hardly. Is that a shot to his credibility? No. But still, I'm just saying that that's just something that's just a little detail that you really got to know by heart. How do I know that 99 was the last time they raced in the Seattle Kingdom, or at least in Seattle before 05? Very well, because 1999 was my second full year following the sport, because I got into the sport back in 97, but I did remember seeing the Seattle race in 97 before Orlando, and I like to consider Orlando my first race. Okay? So just kind of like offering a correction. If you want to see that as kind of calling him out per se in a good way, okay. But I'm trying not to do that in a bad way, and I'm certainly not trying to discredit Jason Wygant at all as an announcer, because he does a hell of a job for sure. I mean, nobody's going to top Art Ekman, but Jason Wygant does come pretty close. Okay? And I admit, I like Lee Diffie myself, but as far as analyst is concerned, I really want Jeff Emig back there for sure. And that's where I'll leave it as far as that part is concerned. So anyway, guys, that's all for today. I'm going to try and watch the Indianapolis race before this week is over. But in the meantime, remember, subscribe if you think that I'm worth listening to. And I'll see you all for that next race.